What if everything you think you're in control of is actually controlling you? That meeting you're replaying in your head, the future you're trying to predict, the opinions you're obsessing over. What if they're not just passing thoughts, but the invisible strings pulling your life? The ancient Stoic philosopher Seneca had a radical idea about this. Worry isn't something that happens to you. It's something you do to yourself. And the moment you see that, everything changes. Seneca put it bluntly, we suffer more often in imagination than in reality. In other words, most of what tortures us isn't life itself. It's the stories we spin about life. You probably recognize that stubborn feeling of being right about how things will go wrong. Many of us cling to familiar ideas because they feel safe, even when they hurt. Remember when you realized a childhood belief wasn't quite true? Like thinking monsters were under the bed, only to grow up and realize the real monsters were the worries you carried in daylight. Seneca's point is that we never really outgrow that pattern. We just trade old fears for new ones. Here's the tension. Your mind is wired to protect you. It scans for danger, imagines worst-case scenarios, and shouts warnings. That's useful when you're crossing a busy street, but brutal when it hijacks your peace over things that haven't, and may never, happen. The deeper awareness, though, is that you're not your thoughts. You're the one watching them. Think about the last time you lost sleep over something. At 3 a.m., it felt like the world was ending. But by morning, with sunlight on your face, the problem shrank. Nothing changed except your perspective. That's Seneca's clue. Worry isn't about the world. It's about the lens you're seeing it through. So why do we keep falling for it? Because worry tricks us into feeling prepared. If you imagine every possible disaster, part of you believes you'll be ready. But Seneca would call that an illusion. You can't rehearse life. The meeting might go fine. The rejection might never come. The illness you fear might stay imaginary. Yet we sacrifice real moments for phantom futures. It's like paying rent on a house you don't even live in. The shift starts with noticing the stories you're hooked by. For example, imagine you're waiting for a text reply. Minutes pass, then hours. Your mind races. Did I offend them? Are they ignoring me? You craft whole narratives in the silence. But here's the truth. You don't know. And the more you chase certainty, the more you feed the anxiety. Seneca's remedy? Train yourself to say, this is my interpretation, not the truth. That tiny pause between what happens and what you decide it means is where your freedom lives. This isn't about positive thinking. It's about accurate thinking. Seneca didn't pretend life was painless. He lived through exile, chronic illness, and political turmoil. But he realized suffering compounds when we resist what we can't change. Picture a dog straining against its leash. The more it pulls, the more it chokes itself. Worry does the same. You're fighting shadows, exhausting yourself over what might never be. Try this. Next time you're spiraling, ask, is this useful? Not, is this true? Because worry feels true in the moment. But usefulness is the compass. If your anxiety won't change the outcome, it's just mental noise. Seneca's practice: write down your worst fears, then ask, how many of them ever happen? You'll see most are ghosts, and the few that do, you handle them, because you always have. This cracks open a new way of seeing worry, not as something to eliminate, but as something to understand. We start by seeing things simply, like a child who believes the world is straightforward. Worry in this phase feels like an intruder, something that shouldn't be there. We think if we just push it away or ignore it, it'll disappear. But life isn't that simple, and neither is worry. It's like trying to hold a beach ball underwater. The harder you push, the more it fights back. In this early stage, we assume worry is the problem, not realizing it's often just a signal, a sign that something deeper needs attention. Then comes the confusing middle, where things get complicated. This is where most of us feel uneasy, because the simple answers stop working. You might be someone who resists change at first, clinging to the idea that worry can be shoved aside. But life has a way of throwing curveballs, and suddenly, the old tricks don't cut it. Seneca, the Stoic philosopher, called this the middle passage, where challenges reveal what we're made of. He believed that difficulties aren't obstacles to avoid, but opportunities to grow. Think of it like learning to ride a bike. At first, you wobble, maybe even fall. It's frustrating, but that's how you find balance. Worry works the same way. When it feels overwhelming, it's not because something's wrong with you. It's because you're in the messy middle of figuring things out. This is where the Barnum effect sneaks in. Most of us feel uneasy during transitions, and we start wondering if we're the only ones struggling. You might catch yourself thinking, "Why can't I just get over this?" Or, "Everyone else seems to have it together." But here's the truth. Everyone wobbles. The difference is whether we let the wobbling stop us or teach us. Seneca contrasted knee-jerk reactions with thoughtful responses, and this is where that distinction matters. Knee-jerk reactions are like slamming on the brakes when you hit a pothole. It might feel right in the moment, but it doesn't solve anything. Thoughtful responses are like steering smoothly around it, aware but not panicked. Gradually, a new clarity emerges. You may catch yourself pausing before reacting lately, noticing that worry doesn't have the same grip it once did. We start seeing that worry isn't the enemy. It's just a part of us trying to help, even if it's not always helpful. This shift doesn't happen overnight. It's like the sun rising. At first, you don't notice the light, but then suddenly, you realize it's morning. Seneca saw challenges as the fire that tempers steel. They don't weaken us, they strengthen us. And in this phase, we begin to understand that. The same worries that once felt like shackles now feel like clues, pointing us toward what truly matters. We start noticing small changes, how we breathe a little deeper when stress hits, or how we question our worries instead of letting them run the show. It's not that life gets easier, it's that we get wiser. The confusing middle taught us that growth isn't about avoiding discomfort, but moving through it. And in that movement, we find a new kind of freedom. Through this discomfort, we begin to see the cracks in the routines we've always taken for granted. The unease that once felt like an obstacle starts to reveal itself as a guide, nudging us towards something deeper. It's not that the path ahead is suddenly clear, far from it. But the very act of feeling unsettled means we're paying attention, and that's where the real work begins. At first, it's easy to mistake this discomfort for failure. We might think we've taken a wrong turn, or that we're not cut out for the challenges in front of us. But what if the discomfort isn't a sign of being lost, but of growing? Like muscles aching after a long workout, the strain is part of the process. The key is to lean into it, not to resist. And slowly, almost without noticing, we start to see things differently. You'll likely find daily decisions coming easier, not because the choices are simpler, but because you're no longer fighting yourself. The old scripts, the ones that told you what you should want or how you ought to react, begin to loosen their grip. It's not that life gets magically easier, but the weight of unnecessary expectations starts to lift. Many notice old frustrations don't bother them as much, not because they've become passive, but because they've learned to distinguish between what matters and what never did. This shift doesn't happen overnight. It's a series of small realizations, moments where we catch ourselves reacting differently than we would have before. Maybe it's pausing before responding to a provocation, or recognizing that a goal we once chased no longer excites us. These are the signs of a mind untangling itself, of priorities aligning with something more genuine. And then comes the strangest part. The things we once feared, uncertainty, change, even criticism, start to lose their power. Not because we've become invincible, but because we've learned to hold them lightly. We see them for what they are, temporary, passing, not the defining forces we once believed. This is where freedom begins to take root. It's funny how often we confuse freedom with having endless options or no responsibilities. But real freedom isn't about escaping constraints. It's about choosing the ones that matter. It's the difference between being trapped by others' expectations and consciously deciding what you're willing to carry. Seneca put it perfectly when he compared it to finally taking off shoes that never quite fit. That's the sensation. Relief, lightness, the sudden awareness of how much unnecessary friction we've been enduring. Together we discover that this journey isn't about arriving at some perfect state of being. It's about shedding the layers that never belonged to us in the first place. The doubts, the outdated rules, the fear of not measuring up, they fall away, not because we've defeated them, but because we've outgrown them. And what's left is something far more interesting. A self that's not fixed, but fluid. Not perfect, but alive. This is where the magic happens. Not in some grand, dramatic transformation, but in the quiet moments where we catch ourselves smiling at an old worry, or feeling curiously unbothered by a situation that would have once derailed us. It's in the way we start to trust our own instincts, not because they're infallible, but because we've learned to listen to them without drowning them out with noise. And the most beautiful part, this isn't a solitary journey. Every step we take, every layer we shed, sends ripples outward. The people around us notice, not because we're preaching or performing, but because the weight we've dropped allows us to move differently. We become a little more present, a little less reactive, and that changes everything. So, if you're in the middle of that discomfort now, know this. It's not a sign you're failing. It's proof you're evolving. The friction you feel is the old version of you rubbing against the new one trying to emerge. And when you finally step into that lighter, truer space, you'll understand why it had to be this way. Because freedom isn't something we find out there. It's something we uncover within, like finally taking off shoes that never quite fit. And once you've felt that, there's no going back. Together, we discover that the real journey was never about becoming someone else. It was about coming home to ourselves. And that's where the real adventure begins.